A lot of people look at recruitment firms as an expense. They look at us as, service providers or vendors. The clients that I'm the most successful with are the ones that are passionate about talent. They know that people are one of the most important, if not the most important asset in the business. And they invest in that, both money, but also time in helping to make sure they find the right people. So if you're a 2 or 3 person company, you're starting to hire that first person outside of your ecosystem, find somebody like myself that you trust and can build a long-term relationship with. But then once you get to that, million, 2 million, 10 million, whatever the number is, and you're looking to scale, that's also another time where you're probably not big enough or shouldn't have an internal recruiter in your company, but you need to have that trusted person that you can work with that knows who you are, knows your culture, knows the type of organization you are, so that if you call me and say, hey, Justin, I need a salesperson, I already know exactly what you're looking for because maybe I've filled it before, or at least I've gotten to know you well enough that I can go out to the market and be like, cool, I've got a salesperson I think would be great. And here's why. And the process is a lot smoother. So finding that recruitment partner is important regardless of what stage you're at, in my opinion.
Quick favor before we jump in. It always surprised me that a large percentage of people who listen to the show regularly haven't yet subscribed. If you're a commercial real estate operator, investor, or builder who values conversations like this around deals, capital, and technology, please take 2 seconds and hit subscribe. It's a simple, free way to support the show. My commitment to you is that my team and I will continue bringing you higher level operators, stronger conversations, and real execution level insights every single week. Thank you. I truly appreciate it. Welcome back to the AI Edge podcast, where we talk with operators, investors, and capital partners shaping the future of commercial real estate, private equity, and business execution. Today, I'm joined by Justin Dixon, founder of Hire Tomorrow. Justin works with private equity firms, startups, and growing operators to solve one of the hardest problems in business, hiring the right people at the right stage. What makes Justin different is that he's not just a recruiter, he's an operator who understands capital growth and what happens when talent decisions compound in either direction. Justin, welcome to the AI Edge podcast.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Awesome, Justin. Let's start with your path. Not just the highlight reel. You spent your entire career in recruiting. How did that path actually happen? And what pulled you into the industry long term?
Well, most people don't go to school to be a recruiter. Like that's not something you go to college for and graduate with a recruitment degree. Most people fall into it accidentally, which is exactly how I did it. I graduated college in 2006, didn't know really what I wanted to do, and just happened to find a recruiting business. I found out that I was pretty good at it, and I just kind of stuck with it. And so I've worked in big recruitment firms early in my career. I worked for a buy-side M&A advisory shop, helped them build their exec search function. I was the first recruiter in an e-commerce startup, so I helped them go from 20 people to 200 in a couple of years, and then I spent about 5 years working at Comcast, leading recruitment teams and helping to build kind of some of the infrastructure there. So, and then I had the bright idea to start my own business. So it's just one of those things that kind of you wake up 10 years and you're like, holy crap, I've been doing this for 10 years. And then you just keep going and then you do it for another 10 years. And so I enjoy it. I like helping, I focus a lot on startups and small businesses now. And so I like helping small businesses compete for talent that they may not be able to find on their own, because the big companies that have a big brand recognition, have an easier time attracting talent. And so small businesses, most people don't know who they are or what they do. And so it's my job to go out and tell their story and try to attract talent that they might not be able to find on their own. So it's been fun.
You made the jump from corporate recruiting into entrepreneurship in January 2020, which
Yep.
was interesting timing, right?
Yeah.
What was the real decision behind starting Hire Tomorrow, and what changed you personally when you made that leap?
Yeah. So I would say if I back up kind of maybe a year or two before I left, I read a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which most people in the real estate world are familiar with. And that kind of was a kind of light bulb moment for myself. And because I grew up in a very small town in central Pennsylvania, and my kind of financial education, like most people, is get a good job, invest in your 401k, and hope you've got enough money when you retire when you're 65 or whatever. And so my wife and I were marching down that path because she had a very similar kind of financial education background as I did. And then we read that book, and it was like, holy crap, there's a whole new way to build wealth and prepare for retirement. And retirement doesn't have to mean working for the man until you're 65. It can mean investing in businesses or real estate that provide you cash flow, and then you live on that cash flow. And so it just kind of opened up this whole world that we weren't exposed to. And so this is probably 2017, 2018. So we drove in head first. My wife is not, doesn't want to be an entrepreneur. She likes the so-called security of a W-2 job. And so she was
Same here.
yeah, she was the steady Eddie, and kind of had the paycheck, and then I was going to go be the risk. And so, but before I jumped out in January of 2020, we did a lot of work on ourselves, both kind of financially, and kind of mentally to kind of get ourselves prepared. So we ended up buying a duplex. We lived in Philadelphia at the time. We bought a duplex out in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, to get some cash flow going and get some real estate under our belt. We lived in a condo in Philadelphia. We ended up moving out of that condo, keeping it, renting it to get a second passive income asset. And then we also kind of downgraded our lifestyles. We went from, not living, high on the hog, but we ended up kind of downgrading so much, but not restricting our lives so that my wife's salary would cover all of our life expenses. So all of our housing, food, all that fun stuff. And so because the intent was for me to quit my W-2 so that I could start Hire Tomorrow, so I could start my own business, but also it would free me up for more time to invest in real estate. And so I ended up January 2020. That was the time that I was going to quit, and I did, unbeknownst to me that COVID was going to be a global pandemic and completely shut down the world, and nobody was hiring for the better part of a year. And so that was a rude awakening as my first entrepreneurial venture in January 2020. So 2020 was not great for a lot of reasons, but definitely not great as a new entrepreneur as well. So
Amazing. If you had to summarize your career journey in one word, you said it was recruiting.
yeah.
So, what does that word actually mean to you today beyond just job placements?
Yeah, I mean, it's really around how do we think about making sure we have the right people around us. And that doesn't have to be, and it could be employees, it could be vendors that you work with, it could be software providers, it could be your friends, and also your ecosystem. I am a firm believer that your net worth is the sum of your network, right? And so I try to surround myself with people that are trying to elevate themselves, because when we started to get into real estate, my wife and I were super passionate about it, because even though I was kind of the front facing person, we always are a team. And so we started working together. And so we started talking about real estate to our friends who were not real estate people. And they're like, they don't want to talk about that. They want to talk about the ball game, or they want to talk about, all these other things. And so we're like, okay, we need to recruit and find other people to hang out with so that, we can talk to real estate people. And so I've had to do that as a small business owner myself, to recruit people around me that are not going to just say everything is fine, right? You need people that are going to challenge you, to hold you accountable, because a lot of times, as I started out, as most people do, as a solopreneur, I didn't have a partner in the business, and so I would wake up and if I didn't feel like working that day, I wouldn't, but I always would, right? Like you have to be self motivating, and so it's always good to recruit people to be around you so that they can help keep you going on some of the days that are not going as well. You may lose a client, you may lose a deal, whatever the case is. Then you just pick yourself up and go find another one.
Amazing. What did you learn the hard way early in on your career that still shapes you today and how you operate today?
I don't know if I learned it the hard way, but I think one of the things that kind of taught me, both my dad had a very, and my mom as well, had a very like strong work ethic. It didn't matter what they were doing; they were going to do it to the best of their ability and put everything into it. So I feel like I've learned a lot from them. But one of my first jobs, I was a beach photographer in Ocean City, Maryland. So anybody that's gone to Ocean City, Maryland, that listens or watches this, and you saw the scope guys running around taking photos, that was me for a summer. And but one of the things that they said was, when you showed up to the office on your first day, they said, if you're early, you're on time. If you're on time, you're late. And if you're late, don't bother showing up. And so I'm a very much an on time. I want to be early. I'd rather be sitting in the parking lot for 10 minutes than rushing in and saying, sorry, I'm a minute late or whatever. So I think those kinds of things really taught me early on to respect my time, but also respect the other people's time that I'm interacting with, whether they're an employee, a customer, potential customer, or whatever. I want to make sure that, we're using the time as wisely as possible. And I think That was one of the lessons I learned very early on in my life, and even before I really started my so-called professional career.
Love it. I want to move into the operator reality because this is where most conversations stay shallow. You've worked with startups, PE backed companies, and mid market operators. Where does complexity show up first as a company starts to scale? People, processes, or leadership?
I would say it depends on the company. I would, I work with companies that are 2 or 3 people and they're looking to hire their first non-friend that they know, right? Somebody out of their ecosystem. Because a lot of startups, it's you got 2 co-founders or 3 co-founders, then you're like, okay, who do you know that could help plug this hole? And then you start to look at your intermediate inner circle. But eventually that inner circle or that network runs out. And so you've got to go out and find that right person that fits not only the skill set that you're looking for, but also the culture that you're trying to build. And also a lot of these startups are like, we need somebody that's going to like join the mission, right? Because all these things are trying to change the world in one form or fashion. And so I have to be that conduit between the business and the founders and the market, the talent that is available that is interested in that type of an organization. And so I've got to get really close and really deep with those founders and those kind of early employees to understand what are they looking for, obviously from a skill set perspective, but also from culture fit and kind of the short and long term with them. So I think most people, you hear there's all these books out there, hire fast, fire fast, or hire slow, fire fast, whatever the model is. And so I think you've got to do what's best for you and work with a partner as early on as possible. A lot of people look at recruitment firms as an expense. They look at us as, service providers or vendors. The clients that I'm the most successful with are the ones that are passionate about talent. They know that people are one of the most important, if not the most important asset in the business. And they invest in that, both money, but also time in helping to make sure they find the right people. So if you're a 2 or 3 person company, you're starting to hire that first person outside of your ecosystem, find somebody like myself that you trust and can build a long-term relationship with. But then once you get to that, million, 2 million, 10 million, whatever the number is, and you're looking to scale, that's also another time where you're probably not big enough or shouldn't have an internal recruiter in your company, but you need to have that trusted person that you can work with that knows who you are, knows your culture, knows the type of organization you are, so that if you call me and say, hey, Justin, I need a salesperson, I already know exactly what you're looking for because maybe I've filled it before, or at least I've gotten to know you well enough that I can go out to the market and be like, cool, I've got a salesperson I think would be great. And here's why. And, the process is a lot smoother. So finding that recruitment partner is important regardless of what stage you're at, in my opinion.
Justin, from your seat, where do founders most misunderstand about hiring when they're in the growth mode?
They're trying, a lot of times I get a lot of clients, especially in the startup-y world, that they have limited budget, even though they've raised a bunch of money, they don't want to go spend it all on one person, right? And so they try to fill one role, or they try to hire one person to fill 3 different positions at the same time. Right. And so I remember I had a client who said they needed to hire a salesperson that also was a CPA accountant, that also was a marketer. And I'm like, okay, well, those 3 things are different people, and they're not always, you can't always find them in one. And if you can, they may not fit your budget. And so really trying to sit down and think about what are the key things I need in that growth stage of my company. A lot of my businesses I work with are SaaS companies. So when they're growing, they need more salespeople, they need more marketing people. And so making sure you have a very clear picture of who you're looking for, both from a skill set perspective, but also thinking about the team that they're going to be going into, like what type of personality is going to be a good fit and maybe not super disruptive, or maybe you want somebody that's disruptive because the culture in that team is stagnant, right? And so you need to have somebody come in that's going to ruffle a few feathers and help that organization grow even faster than what they want to. So really being clear on kind of what you're looking for, and then obviously you need to make sure that fits your budget. So I have a lot of people that come to me and say, I want to hire somebody with 20 years of experience, but I've got budget for somebody that's got 3 years of experience, right? And so, making sure that your expectations are aligned with the market. And, again, going back to finding a good partner is always going to be helpful in that scenario as well.
And what does that mistake cost them, say 6 or 12 months later?
You may hire the wrong person. So, especially in a startup, one bad apple can really, really upset the apple cart. And so while the same thing goes with you hire a great person in a startup, it can have a tremendous positive impact on a company. If you hire somebody that's not a good fit at, a big company like a Comcast or a Dell or Oracle, it's a blip, right? It's not that big of a deal. But if in a startup, startup, if you've got 20 people and one of them you hired is ends up disrupting the other 19, then you've got a big problem. And so, one, you could take a long time to try to find the person if you're trying to do it yourself while you're also trying to run a business or scale a business. And two, you may just not find the right person, and then you've got to replace them, and then it sets you back, even farther than what you were before. So doing a little bit of legwork on the front end can really help save you on the back end.
I want to talk about talent as a system, not as a transaction. When you work with private equity firms in their portfolio companies, how do the best operators think about recruiting differently than everyone else?
I think they kind of do the opposite of what I just talked about, right? They do have a plan. They have relationships with folks like myself or other partners that they've worked with for a long time, and they call them and say, "Hey, here's what I'm thinking, or here's where I'm at. Here's where I'm trying to go. What type of talent's available? What are the price points for that type of talent?" And so they have a much clearer picture that's baked in reality versus baked in kind of their own brain where it's, hey, I think I need to hire a salesperson or I need to hire a marketer or I need to hire a product person, but I think I can pay this. Well, is that really in line with the market? And the only way you're going to know, yes, you can pull data, you can ask ChatGPT and get a ballpark, but until you go out and start talking to people, you don't really know what exactly the available talent for the role that you're looking to fill is actually commanding or looking for in the market. You may be positively surprised where you maybe have more budget than you thought, or you're very, you're surprised from a negative perspective and you need to flex a little bit more or tweak the job description a little bit so that you're, finding the right person that actually fits your budget. So they're much more thoughtful in the front end around, okay, where are we at now? Where are we going? What do I need to get there? And how am I going to do it? And maybe that's them doing it themselves because they're big enough to do that. Or they're like, okay, cool. I need to call Justin or their preferred vendor of choice and say, here's where I'm at. Here's what I'm thinking. What are you seeing? What are your other clients doing? Where are they finding talent? Maybe they're not finding it in Austin where we are. Maybe they're finding it in Nashville, right? Or maybe they're finding it in Pennsylvania or wherever. And so they're really having that trusted advisor and partner that is bringing you information, not just being a vendor and filling a position.
What does repeatable hiring system actually look like, Justin, in practice versus reactive hiring?
It's that front end. It's getting ahead of it. And because a lot of times we get called, and this is we meaning the collective recruitment world, when they've already tried to fill it themselves, they've spent 30, 60 days trying to fill it themselves via the job posting, right? I call it the post and pray method. They posted a job and they pray somebody great applies and that they find them and hire them. And so sometimes that works. A lot of times it may not, depending on the level of role. And so we are getting called 30, 60, 90 days when they've already been like, we're past our target hire date and now we need to fill it ASAP. And so they're like, cool, Justin, just go find me this person. And my process is, well, okay, let's understand where you are, what you didn't see in the job posting or the job applicants that you were getting. What didn't you see in the interviews that you wanted to experience or have those people have experience doing? And so we have to spend that, hour, 2 hours up front understanding where you got to now, like what got you here. And then, okay, what are we trying to solve for and how fast can we run at this problem? And so, really having that upfront conversation and bringing us into the process earlier, like I talked about, and then just having that ongoing dialogue because I have a lot of times I have clients. I'm like, hey, I've got a really good salesperson or a really good marketing person. You may not be hiring, but could you up top grade your talent, right? And so I will pass that lead, if you will, to my clients. And sometimes I get a fee, sometimes I don't. But my goal is to make sure that client is super happy, both in the short term and the long term, because my business has been built on referral. Like I do some business development, but most of it is, hey, Justin, you should talk to this person because I place them there or whatever. And so it's just a matter of kind of adding value, even though there's not an open position. That's kind of how it made sense for me.
Justin, where do you see operators relying too much on instinct and not enough on the process?
A lot of times they don't have process, frankly. A lot of startups, it's just hey, we need to hire this person. Okay, well, who's doing the interviews? How are we writing the job description? What's our budget? How do we come at that budget? There's a lot of things that you need to go through. And so there is really no process to follow. And so it takes somebody like myself or an HR person or a consultant to come in and say, hey, in order for us to build a repeatable recruitment or hiring process, here are the things that you need, and also some systems and processes in place. A lot of these startups don't have applicant tracking systems, which is, where everybody applies and that's where everybody kind of gets dumped into. And so they rely on just, okay, well, this person's time to go on the phone, so I'm going to hire them, right? And it's like, okay, well, now you can use AI to do pretty much everything, right? So you can, it's kind of interesting. I've had a few people that I can very clearly tell they are letting AI listen to our conversation and my questions, and then AI is responding, and they are just repeating or kind of reading the response. And so, I think if you hear the perfect answer, you may want to ask a very, tailored question after that to make sure they're not just using AI to fake the interview and all that fun stuff. So I think just having some standardized, and this is not overly complicated. Don't get me wrong. This is not something you need to spend weeks or months or pay McKinsey to come in and tell you how to hire and build a process. It's just very simple stuff around job descriptions and who's posting, where you're posting, all this stuff. It's very simple, but again, a lot of times it's a little bit of a fire drill, and all startups are super fast paced, right? So they don't have time to sit down and write out the process of who's going to interview, how they're going to interview, what questions can you ask, what questions can't you ask? Because a lot of times people don't know you can't ask a lot of questions because it provides discriminatory information. And so, even in this day and age, I was telling somebody the other day, people are still making the same mistakes they were making 20 years ago when I started in recruiting that they are today. And so, even though technology's changed, hiring processes have changed, et cetera, the problems are still there. The mistakes are still there. Finding a job is not super simple. So it's kind of interesting.
What actually drives success behind the scenes when it comes to building teams that scale?
It's all about, my job is to help you find somebody to get to your front door, right? What happens after they cross the threshold of that door is up to you. And that's onboarding, that is culture, that is how are you retaining talent, paying them, and so in order for a small business or a big business, you have to have very intentional thought that goes into, okay, now I've hired this person, what happens next until they are productive, right? Because there's always that, you know, depending on the job, can be a month, it can be 3 months, it can be 6 months until they are ultra productive and feel like they at minimum know where the bathroom is, right? And so, getting that onboarding process dialed in, getting the, okay, here are all the pieces of technology that we use, and you have access to it now. Like, I don't know how many times I've started jobs in my career where it's like, I started a job and I didn't have a laptop for the first week. I mean, how am I supposed to do a recruitment job if I don't have a laptop? And so, so there's simple things that, having those things thought of ahead of time, like, okay, if we hire somebody and they're fully remote, how do we get them a laptop? How do we get them access to all the things? What's their first day look like? Scheduling meetings for employees ahead of time for the people that they need to meet. So if you're a new employee, regardless of what level, here are the people that you should meet to get to know who they are, what their department does, how they interact, what, et cetera. Not forcing that candidate or that employee to, reach out to people and schedule their own meetings, being like, nope, we already have your first 2 days, 3 days set up. You're going to meet with these people at these times, and just kind of put a little thought process into that kind of first 30 days is really important. But then it's how do I keep them? How do I keep them? How am I paying them? How am I incentivizing them? What are the other fun things that I can offer as a company that my competitors aren't? And, obviously back in the day, Google and Facebook, all those things were like free food, all the massages, all this stuff. And that's attractive to some people. But now if you're all remote, well, those things carry less value. So how am I building a culture with everybody that's interacting like we are via Zoom or some type of video call? So, again, it's just a little bit of legwork in the front end and can go a super long way.
Justin, you sit in a really interesting seat because talent decisions are capital decisions. From your perspective, what signals tell you a founder or an operator is real when you're evaluating whether you want to work with them?
I would say a lot of times when I get brought in by a private equity firm, I know that they have a need because they've invested a lot of money in buying that business, right? And so I know pretty quickly that they're going to be able to pay my fee, right? And they're not just kicking the tires, right? Because a lot of my agreements are retained and all that fun stuff. So there's a lot of kind of things that go into it. Where I have to make an assessment is when I get brought in by a company and they're like, hey, we don't have a lot of money and we think we want to hire this, or there's a lot of like ifs and buts and maybes in the initial conversation. And oh, by the way, they don't want to do some type of retained search. They want to do contingent, which means I don't get paid my fee unless I place somebody. And so that while that's great for the employer, it's not great for me because I've got to do a lot of work and maybe I get it, maybe I don't. And that's the risk that we take in this business. So if that's the case, then I've got to do a lot of upfront digging on, okay, well, what have you done before? How many have you worked with other agencies? If so, how has that gone? Because, past performance can be a pretty good indicator of future performance, right? And so I've got to ask a lot of questions around how serious are you, what's your budget, et cetera, before I'm willing to, take a position, because I don't take every job order, job rec, whatever you want to call them, that crosses my desk, because I want to make sure that if I'm going to invest my time, because my company is not very big, right? I only work with a handful of customers, and I only have bandwidth for a handful of positions at a time. I'm not a big firm, and nor do I want to act like a big firm where I just take 50, 60 positions at a time, and then my customer service to my clients is very poor. I take on positions that I know I can help my clients with. And so that's why I have to do a lot more due diligence than, maybe a bigger firm, or a firm that is just like, give me as many recs as I possibly can. And that way I can try to make as much money as I possibly can. I'm more focused on the long term than just being very transactional.
Do you help solopreneurs?
Do I help solopreneurs? Absolutely. I mean, if they need it, right? Like if they're interested, like I have a company I'm talking to right now. It's a founder, and he's looking for a co-founder that has, that's more of a technical founder, because he's a non-technical person, and so he's got this idea, and he was able to vibe code, using tools like Lovable and things like that, to get to the point where the software that he has an idea for demoable, but it's definitely not scalable at that point, right? And so you need a technical person to kind of take it that next level. And so he's been bootstrapping it himself. So, I can create a very creative structure in helping them find a co-founder or their number two. So yeah, if they're in the right mindset, and they know what they want next, and they want somebody like myself to help them, absolutely. I'll help a one person company, I'll help a million person company. It doesn't really matter, because we're trying to solve the same problem. That's find the right people for the right seats, and make sure that, they actually are the right people.
Just a little quick side note. I met a friend of mine I haven't seen in several years or so in the grocery store, out there grocery shopping with my wife. And I was like, wow, I haven't seen you in a while. What you been doing? He's now an influencer
Mm,
on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, has over 1 million followers now.
geez.
And he goes around the local area and does like reviews on restaurants, hotels. They pay him to go there. So he's building this great business, and he's getting paid on social media. And then he was like, you know what? My audience is basically middle-aged women. What
Okay.
do they make? Makeup? Well, I can't really make makeup. How about candles? He started making candles. He's making over 300 a day, and this is all himself. I'm like, dude, you need to hire somebody. I mean,
Yeah.
you are doing everything on his own. Literally owns a job that he's working like 12 to 14 hours a day. So he can definitely use someone like Hire Tomorrow in
Yeah,
order to
probably. Yeah.
help him build his business and scale his business, so he's not doing everything himself.
Yeah. No, it's fair.
Him and his wife actually.
Yeah. No, that
I'll have to
sounds like he's
connect
got
him
a
with
good
you.
business, but yeah, no, happy to chew the fat with him and see if I can help.
Fantastic. How does hiring strategy change once private equity is involved? And where do operators struggle with that transition?
There's a lot more time sensitivity to hiring once a private equity is involved, because they typically are getting into a business that they have aspirations of obviously increasing the profitability of that business over the next 3 to 5 years, and then exiting, right? So they've got a finite amount of time that they are trying to be involved in this business. So hiring decisions have to be made as quickly as possible. But also, even though you've gotten a lot of money from that private equity group, you still need to be focused on, okay, not just throwing money at people and hiring, and overpaying people, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot more time sensitivity to hiring, because if they're like, hey, I've just bought your business, and I've invested, $20 million in this company. I need to go from 10 million to, or 50 million to 100 million in the next 2 years or whatever. So you need to hire a lot of people to do that typically. And so, we have to hire quickly, but we also need to be kind of like snipers and be very accurate on our hiring processes. So when I get brought in, I already know that the fire's already lit, and we need to start driving, because the whoever my hiring manager is, they're getting, yelled at by the private equity group and the board. We need to fill these roles. We need to fill them now, and we need to fill them with the right people. So from my side, I know that time is of the essence. I know that quality of the essence, just like it is in every search. But any kind of misstep, whether it's timing or quality, is going to be highly scrutinized by not only the company but also the private equity firm. So if you're a founder of a business and you've built it maybe over the last 10, 15 years, whatever it is, and you've been doing it kind of your way, and now you bring in a capital provider, well, they're going to, especially if you give up majority control, they now are your boss. And so you are now not able to go at your own pace. You have to go at their pace. And so you've got to be a little bit more buttoned up, a little bit more professional. Sometimes they want to be involved in the interview process, depending on the level of person that we're hiring. So you've got a lot more eyeballs on you. But also it can be a lot of fun because you may need that money to scale because you know what got you here won't get you there. And so you may need some money just to pour a little gas on the fire and um but then that comes with some baggage. So it's you got to be prepared as a founder. You've got to be prepared if you're taking on some private equity. You need to make sure that's the right move for you, both in the short term, but also in the medium and long term, because they're going to want to get out at some point. Um, and that may mean selling the business to another private equity group, to another company that just acquires you. So you got to really think, at least like 3 or 4 steps ahead, to make sure it's the right decision.
What do most founders underestimate about how the hiring process impacts valuation, execution risk, and investor confidence?
I think one of the interesting things that I'm seeing a lot of, especially as the baby boomers, we've all heard the silver tsunami. We've all heard, buying boring businesses, all the private equity scooping up all these, commercial services businesses, HVAC landscaping, you name it, they're scooping these things up. But I actually just got back from a conference in Charleston where it was an M&A conference. And one of the biggest challenges that these founders have is what they call key man risk. And key man risk is essentially Justin Dixon LLC has this $10 million landscaping business, but if Justin Dixon leaves, a lot of the clients, a lot of the agreements are handshakes or paper based, right? So it's really a one person company, even though there's employees in the business. And so you have to think about, if you're going to sell a business, especially one that is a bit reliant on the founder, you have to think about who is my successor and having that person in place when you're thinking about exiting. Because a private equity group and an investment banker, if you're going to use an investment banker to help sell that business, they're going to be very, very focused on, okay, well, what happens when you leave? Because most founders, especially as you get up in age, you don't want a 3 or 5 year, you don't want to be working there for 3 or 5 years. You want to sell that business, get that check, and go sit on the beach, even if you have a 6 month or a year kind of lockup period. But they're not going to want to buy your business, or they will undervalue your business because there's that risk of, if you leave, some of your customers may go and leave with you and go somewhere else. And so having a thoughtful plan around, and I actually have a service that I offer to these types of founders called succession recruiting, is like, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Founder, like, you're going to sell your business. Cool. Who's your successor? Well, I don't know. That's their problem. Well, it is, but it also is your problem, because you're not going to get the best valuation if they see you as a key man risk. And so I come in, usually a year or 2 years before they're ready to sell, so that we can, because a lot of times they don't have kids, that either A, they don't have kids at all, or B, the kids don't want the business. They want to do something else, or they don't have somebody in the business that is ready to take that CEO or president role. So I'll come in and help them think about, okay, if we're going to sell this in 2 years, we need to hire somebody as soon as possible so they can learn from you. All your customers become comfortable with them, so that at the time of exit, you can either stay on and maybe have an easy transition, or you can be gone because now you've got this president on board and they have 18 months to 2 years under their belt. And so the investment bankers feel comfortable valuing your business correctly and marketing it appropriately. And private equity also has they value that business at the same level you do. And so you get the most bang for your buck by having that successor kind of already in place.
Would you never overlook again when helping a company hire at a critical stage?
I think one thing that's kind of been fascinating over the course of my career is not trying to always be as surgical as finding the perfect person, right? So I think some of my most successful hires have been people that have been, and I hate to use the term, but a little bit outside of the box. But they just feel like they're a perfect culture fit, but their skill set is not 100% aligned. And I don't know how many times I've submitted candidates that I tell my clients, and I'm very transparent. I'm like, hey, I think you should talk to this person. I just got this vibe that I think they would fit very well into your culture. They have maybe a passion about what you're trying to do, but their skill set is not like, it's not like I'm hiring a basket weaver to be a salesperson, but maybe they've been in sales, but in a different part of sales or a different industry, and they're not doing B2B SaaS, right? They're doing, something completely different. Like I hired somebody that was doing, they're selling education software, which is a very different sales cycle than selling other types of software. So, but I'm like, this person just has that like it factor that for this specific company, they should be really, really a good fit. And I would say probably I have a better like long-term hit rate on those than just some of the, hey, this person worked at your competitor, they were successful, let's hire them, because sometimes their culture fit just doesn't align. So, for anybody out there, if you just have this, like, sometimes recruiting is still gut. I think people overlook like this whole gut feeling thing, because I think sometimes it's like you just need to sometimes take a chance on people that may not fit all of the criteria, but they check the box that is sometimes the most important, and that is, are they a good culture fit? Are they aligned with our mission? And they are. You can teach skill set, right? You can teach somebody how to do something, but you can't teach them how to have passion about your product or your customers, and be a good culture fit. So, not overlooking that, I wouldn't go out and hire, maybe your neighbor if you're best friends just because they're your best buddy necessarily. But you get my point. Like hiring somebody that you have a little bit of affinity for, that fits your culture, that may have a little bit of training that's needed on the skill set side.
Love it. This is the AI Edge podcast. So let's talk a little bit about AI.
Yeah.
So I want to ground this in reality. Recruiting is flooded with AI tools right now, Justin. From where you sit, where does AI actually help and where is it just noise?
I would say that a lot of the AI, like applicant tracking systems, have AI built into it that is very helpful for automation purposes, sending emails automatically, putting people into sequences. So if I move them into this stage of the process, they automatically get an email and they know what's going on. So keeping candidates a little bit more up to date. And a lot of that is it's called AI with air quotes, but really it's just automations. Like if I do this, then do this, right? But it is AI, according to the applicant tracking system. So I think some of those tools are very helpful just to keep recruiters, and candidates up to date on what's going on, right? I think I've not exhausted the universe of AI recruitment tools, but a lot of the AI sourcing tools, meaning the tools that are helping you identify talent on like LinkedIn and things like that. In my humble opinion, they're not there yet. They'll probably get there, but I would still rather trust myself to, and maybe because I'm an older person and I'm not 25 years old anymore. But I think I've tested enough that they're not there yet. So I'm not ready to allow an AI tool to reach out to candidates that I have not already said, "Yep, this person looks good. I'm willing to reach out." And I think the other thing that I think there's a lot of hype around is AI interviewing tools. So people that, instead of having a person interview them, an AI bot will conduct an interview, an audio based interview. And so the pluses of that are, especially if you're hiring for high volume. So think warehouse, manufacturing, call center, where you've got hundreds of applicants and 90% of them you're not going to get through, and so it causes a poor candidate experience because they're never going to get a phone interview because a recruiter has, they've got 1,000 applicants they've got to get through, and they're going to get through the first 25. Cool, these all look good. I'm going to hire one of them. And so I think having a candidate have the ability and the option, because usually they're doing it as an option. You can or you don't have to. Having the option of being able to do an AI interview, so that maybe that AI interview will get in front of a recruiter, because maybe on paper I don't look great, or maybe they've sorted the applicants by alphabet, and so my last name starts with a Z, so I'm never going to get seen because they start with A, B, and they get to C, and they're like, cool, we have enough. We don't need to see all the rest. And so I think that application is very interesting because it allows more candidates to technically have some type of an interview process. Now, the risk of that is, if you have an AI bot it's just like all of the meetings, note taking softwares, right, that are out there. If you have a bot that is asking questions, which you can control the question that it asks, you cannot control what the person on the other side of that phone says. So why that's a risk is if the bot asks, "Hey, why did you leave your last two jobs?" and that person provides some discriminatory or potentially discriminating information, that bot is capturing all of that information and storing it in their what's called a system of record. So the applicant tracking system or their own database would be considered a system of record, which is discoverable if that person feels they were discriminated against and they sue. And now you can't say, "Well, we didn't know about this." Well, yep, your bot captured every word that I said. So I had a panel here in Austin in October and November, and one of the panelists was a lawyer who focused on AI within the private equity world, so helping their clients think about the risks of AI. And he has been talking a lot about over the next 2 to 3 years, some of the biggest risks that he sees are HR related risks, very similar to what I just described, of people saying things that maybe they don't think is that bad, and then AI capturing that data, and then they get sued, and then unfortunately they have that in their system of record. So I don't use AI interviewing mostly because I tend to hire more more senior employees, and so they're not, in my opinion, I've not done enough research to know if this is true or not, but they don't really want to do AI interviews. They want to talk to a human, and they want to make sure they're being taken care of. So I don't use it. Not to say that I wouldn't, but I think there's still a lot of risk around that. And the last thing I'll talk about that is very noisy is AI and fake applicants. So you can hire if you're looking for a job out there, and you know what most people did, and what I did when I was looking for a job is you'd go home, you'd fire up Indeed or LinkedIn or Monster or whatever job applicant software or website you want, and you would just search for jobs and you would just apply, upload your resume. Maybe the parsing worked, maybe it didn't, and so it's very manual. Whereas now you can hire a bot that can apply to thousands of jobs for you and so while as a candidate, that sounds great because then I don't have to do anything. I just give them my resume, tell them kind of the things I want, and they go off and they apply. What the problem with that is from a hiring perspective is a lot, especially for small businesses, they are what if they posted a job last year, maybe they got 50, 100 applicants. Now they're getting 5, 600, 1,000 applicants to the same type of job. Half of them are fake. So sometimes what these AI bots will do is they'll say, okay, I've got Justin's resume. He's a salesperson and he's in some project management early in his career. And so I'll tweak his resume a little bit to make it look better for the project manager job than the sales job. And so, as a HR person or hiring person, you don't know what's fake. And so we've actually seen a lot of our clients come to us and be like, I can't manage 5 or 6 open positions where I'm getting 5 or 600 applicants per position. I just can't manage that flow. And so we've actually had to create, because of their problem, we created a separate service offering where they outsource all that stuff to us because we've got the systems and tools and expertise to like manage that flow of applicants. And so it saves them a lot of time so they don't have to sift through it. We just kind of sift through it ourselves. And then we bubble up kind of the top 5 or 6 people that fit their criteria. And so they are not wasting all that front end time. So that is the noisy side of AI at the moment in the recruiting process. It is making it very, very, very difficult for businesses of all sizes to manage the applicant flow. And so then it's inherently making it harder and harder for people to find jobs because now they're not only competing with 50 people, they're competing with bots and fake resumes. And it's becoming very unfortunate and making it very, very difficult to find a job. And so I get clients that are like, we're not going to post this job. We just want you to go find it, find this person. And so that's what we do. So that's a little bit of a rant. So I apologize about that. But there's a lot of things going on in AI and recruitment that are some good, some not so good yet.
Love it. Here we go. We'll do like short little answers here. What parts of recruitment should absolutely remain human, no matter how good AI gets?
I still think the interview process, like the interviewing, still needs to be done by a human, especially for like senior level positions. I don't think, like I said before, I think, you can use AI interviewing for like lower level, high volume positions where you're hiring classes of people that start. I think that can be a time saver for the recruitment teams. But I still think the human to human connection of an interview, video or phone, is still very, very important on both sides for the candidate and for the.
If you were building a recruiting firm from scratch today with AI as a given, what would you automate first?
I think I would so if I can create the AI or the tools, a lot of the AI recruitment sourcing tools are not built by recruiters, they're built by technologists. And so they don't know the process that we go through or tend to not know. So if I could create a sourcing tool from scratch, I would love that. But I think if I had to buy one out of the box, I think a lot of the automation, I would set up very intentionally automation process of outreach, follow up, reminders to the recruiter to be like, hey, you moved Justin to reject, but you didn't tell him that he didn't get the job. So you need to tell him he didn't get the job, right? If I haven't set up an automation for that already. So I think there's some automation tools that I would, if I started from 0 and get to 1, there's some automation tools I would implement that would make my life easier. Because sometimes doing what I've done is I didn't start with the AI. I started with the process, and then I've got to shoehorn the AI into it. And I'm also older, so I don't love to, change things as much. But yeah, I think I would just lean into the AI tools that already exist in a much more structured fashion.
How should operators think about AI and hiring without turning it into a shortcut that creates risk?
I think you can use AI as a very good comparison model. So what I mean by that is, let's say you have multiple candidates do assessments, and whether they're personality assessments or they are, actually skill assessments, and then you have the resume, you have the job description, you've got to do some legwork up front. But if you have profiles of your employees that are on that team, let's say you've all done DISC or you've all done Strengths Finders or whatever the assessment is, you can put all that data into a model and then say, okay, what's missing that I should hire for? Or here's my team. Here are the candidates that I think are really good. What ones, based on some data, would you think would be have the highest probability of being successful, right? So thinking about using it as like an evaluative tool, by uploading a bunch of data both from your side and from the candidate side, I think could be very interesting. You got to be careful on what you're sharing, what you're not, if it's training on that data, if it's not. But I think some of the ways you can evaluate, but again, I think just like with a lot of AI, it gets you 70, 80% of the way there. You still have to make the decision. So use it as a data point, but not the data point, if that makes sense.
Let's talk to the audience. What should operators focus on in the next 12 months when it comes to talent and AI?
I think it depends on the company that you're in. So if you're like a manufacturing company or a commercial services company, I think leveraging all the tools to help automate the process to take a lot of the noise from your side out is going to be very helpful to make you as efficient as possible as you're interviewing for any hire that you're trying to make. I think you need to start asking, if you're like a tech company, even if you're a salesperson or a marketer or whatever, like talking about how they're using AI, not necessarily in their day job, but also in their personal lives, is important because, like it or not, AI is here. AI is going to get it better and better and better theoretically. So, making sure that people are keeping up with it is going to be important, because you want them to bring ideas to your company around, hey, here's how we leverage AI, or here's how we leverage this tool, or hey, I've used AI because I've used it more as a thought partner, not a email writer, right? I think being able to ask questions around how are they leveraging AI or thinking about it in their personal and professional lives is going to continue to be more and more important, especially the higher up we go, because a lot of companies, and we're seeing it on people being laid off, and they're touting AI. I think it's probably 10% of the reason why they're laying people off. I think a lot of it is just to save money and be more financially savvy and look better for the market. But they're saying it's AI. Some of it probably is, but I don't think it's as mass as it actually comes out to be. So just thinking about it and talking about it and more, and then also they need to start using it if they're not already. Like, and that's another thing, is like, if you're not using it, you don't need to be an expert, but just using it on a daily basis is going to be helpful.
Absolutely. Last quick one. I want to pull this up as a strategic level for the listeners. So, for founders listening who are in early or mid stage, what's one hiring decision they should slow down on?
I would say one hiring decision they should slow down. I would say hiring their first, if they're hiring like salespeople, I think making sure you're finding the right like sales leader. That's a very key hire, especially because, again, most of my clients are SaaS. So go to market is very, very important. So not just hiring a person that you've met before or known before, making sure that you're finding the right person for the stage of growth that you're in, because you may have worked in an enterprise sales company and you're SMB. Those are two different sales processes, right? So making sure that sales leader is important. And I'll just flip it just for 1 second. I think one thing that people should think more about, and not just spend more time on, but actually think about, is hiring, especially for like CEOs, hiring an executive assistant, whether they're in the US, in the Philippines, wherever. Think of all the admin stuff that you do that is robbing your business of your brain to be more strategic and thoughtful. And so hiring is somebody that, you pay a couple $1,000 a month for, is going to save you exponentially in your ability to focus on, how do I drive my business forward, not how do I schedule this meeting. That's not what you're supposed to be doing as a CEO.
I love that, Justin. That's great advice. Justin, where can people connect with you online in your work?
I mean, I'm all over LinkedIn. I've got my own podcast, Growth Capital Podcast. So check me out on all the other podcast platforms after you listen to this AI Edge podcast. But yeah, LinkedIn's the best. I'm always on there posting stuff. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out.
Fantastic. Justin, appreciate you bringing the operator level view to talent, systems, and scale. This has been the AI Edge podcast. If this episode changed how you think about hiring, execution, growth, share it with another founder, operator, or investor who needs this perspective. And we'll see you on the next episode. Thank you, Justin.
Thank you.